Hello and welcome to the latest lesson on assessments. Part 5 of our series looks at Criterion referenced assessments. These can come in a variety of types that we will go through in some detail. So, starting with the types of grades, we have percentage grades, letter grades, fractional grades, and skills checklists, each of which has their own purpose. So, starting with percentage grades. These are where you get a score out of 100. The pass mark is typically in the 50 to 60% range, depending on the region. These are most common in the higher grades of public school. You are much more likely to see them in high school than university. And again, much more likely to see them in high school or junior high or middle school than in elementary or grade school. The major downside of percentage grades is that the reporting precision exceeds the statistical uncertainty in most cases. So you've got 100 categories here, and you're measuring it to the percentage. But if you look at student performance and the variables in it, and look at the statistical uncertainty and how consistent they are, you will find that the uncertainty is often 2 or 3%. Now, the level of that uncertainty is variable. It is greatest when we are near the 50% mark, and it's smallest at the 0 or 100%, because at 0 or 100 you get much more consistent results from the students. But there is that variability, which is often greater than the number that's on the report card. Furthermore, if you're looking at a system with, say, a 50% pass, the difference between a 62 and a 63% doesn't matter much, but the difference between 49 and 50 is very significant. We can compare these with letter grades. These are in fewer bins, so instead of having 100 categories, or more to the point 101 because percentage grades allow 0, you will have 13 bins, and that is a much smaller set. So they're typically A+, A minus, B+, B, B minus, and so forth. That means you are much more confident that the student is in the right bin here than with a percentage. So if you're not sure if they've got a 62 or a 63 statistically, but you know that on your scale, 62 and 63 are both C-, well then you're confident that they've got a C-. Fractional grades are a little different. They could be out of 4, out of 12, out of 10. So again, if you have fewer bins than the letter grades, you are much more confident that you're accurately placing the students. Take this to the extreme. You can even have strictly pass-fail. So there's really 2 bins. You made the cut or you didn't. These fractional grades are far more common on individual assignments than they are on complete courses. And the final type of criterion referenced grading is the skills checklist. Here we start with a list of outcomes from the program of study. You build an individual checklist of skills that you can give to each student. And this information gives the students maximum guidance for where further improvement is needed. Because they could see, oh, I'm good with this skill, I need some help with that skill. It can be a true-false style, where the skill is consistently demonstrated or it's not. Or you could break it down into a little more detail. You don't want to go too many different categories because then again you're running into the problem of having a large number of bins and having less confidence that the student is in the correct bin. So once we have the different grading types, we have to figure out how to calculate the final grades. Ultimately, the goal should be to inform students of which topics need further work and which do not. The skills checklist is the most effective grading style for this goal. Unfortunately, the specific type of reporting is often not a classroom-level choice. Sometimes the school administration decides it, sometimes the school board decides it, and nobody at the school has an option for how the skills are reported. Now, ideally, you want to be balancing curricular outcomes and not assessments. So if you have, say, 2 unit exams, and one covers 4 curricular outcomes and the other covers 3, they should not be equally weighted. Not unless one curricular outcome should have more weighting than others. Now, there are a number of digital gradebook products that make this much easier to do today. This is called standards-based grading, and there are several out there in the field. Also, the grade should be based exclusively on the outcomes in the program of studies. So unless your program of studies talks about attendance, behavior, and etc., those elements should not be a part of the report card grade, particularly since things like attendance and tardiness are often not in the power to control for the youngest students, even some of the older ones. To pick a specific example, when I was in high school, I had a classmate who was notoriously late through grades 10 and 11, and suddenly in grade 12, he was there on time every day. When he had to fill out the late slips explaining why he was late, his answers were consistently absurd and amusing, and he would often face repercussions for it. Things like, he got abducted by a UFO on the way to school and things like that. I found out from a mutual friend after graduation what was really going on is that when he woke up in the morning, he would have to try to sober up his single parent. And if he couldn't get that parent sober, well, then they couldn't get to school. So he would be the one making lunches for the younger siblings, getting that parent ready to safely drive them in, getting them to school, or if that wasn't going to work, paying for cabs to get them all where they were. The reason that he started coming on time in grade 12 is because he got his driver's license and he got a job and he got his own car. So if he woke up and his parent was passed out, he left his parent there and brought the kids to school. This is the behavior he was being penalized for. So again, we don't know necessarily what's happening at school, and very often penalizing a student for attendance and tardiness is not directing the behavior or the idea of punishment in the right location. It is often well beyond the control of that student. Of course, knowing what is ideal for the marks and making it feasible can be two different things. Manual tracking is tedious, particularly if you have a lot of outcomes in your course. I teach in Alberta, where most of our high school math courses, excepting calculus, have between 15 and 24 curricular outcomes for the entire course. That's not too bad to track manually. Calculus is more like 250. It was written in an old style. There's over 170 in the grade 12 physics course that I teach. So there are numerous digital gradebook packages that support standards-based grading now. You can just indicate in those software packages which standards are associated with which assignments or assessments, and these will take care of the rest. There are even online assessment tools, which can produce printed paper copies of the assessments that will do this correlation for you as well. I'm also a big fan of using website-based homework that allows students to retry until they get it for that formative assessment stage. So this way they can keep going until it starts to make sense, until they sort it out with no real punishment for not getting it right the first time. They can always improve if they've made errors. So this wraps up the general overview of Criterion referenced assessments. Next up, we're going to look at individual item analysis. This is a big part of telling whether or not the assessment item you are using is actually doing the job you intend it to do. Following that, we'll take a look at item response theory, which is a more detailed version of item analysis. In part 8, we will look at computerized adaptive testing. And then finally, in part 9, we will look at non-parametric item response theory, And this will wrap up this 9-part course.